This is the Balanced Advisor Podcast with Dr. Travis Perry, helping financial advisors like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Advisor Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today I have a special guest, Tim Bickmore. Tim is a co-founder and director of financial planning at LBW Wealth Management. He currently is a CFP and a CPWA professional and resides in Monona, Wisconsin. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Thank you, Travis. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. It was fun to get to know you in the pre-show and hear about your story and kind of what got you ticking in the industry. I'm fascinated by some of the stuff that we're going to kind of piece together here in this interview today. But tell us in your own words, my friend, how did you get to this industry and what are you doing? You know, you're doing a lot of things differently and you're shaking it up. So let's hear kind of like how you got here and what you guys are doing, what you're about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to tell people that I stumbled into this industry. I think a lot of people sometimes do. But how I kind of stumbled into it, and I think it was a good stumble, is I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I went from Utah to Wisconsin, and I went to school at a small little art school called Lawrence University. And when I got there, I kind of stumbled into Lawrence University. And when I decided to go, I said, I really want to do business. Well, there was no business degree. So the closest thing I could get was economics. So I'm like, great, I'm going to be an economics major. Growing up, my dad was in small business, same with my uncles. And so business and entrepreneurship, something that just really interested me. But I really kind of had this analytical bent to myself. And so I wanted to do as much finance as I could. So I took all the accounting classes, did some investment analysis classes in corporate finance. And in some of those classes, we did stock research. And I had to do an equity research paper on a couple different companies. And that really was like, this is really fun. I really enjoy it. I want to be an investment analyst. And by the time I was ready to graduate, I hadn't done enough work probably to get into private banking or, private equity or things in that nature. So I had to kind of reshift. And I was like, all right, well, if I can't do that, then what else can I do? And the Northwest Mutuals and the Edward Jones and all of those people had reached out to try to recruit me. And I just was uncomfortable. I just didn't want to go sell things. This is not what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be an analyst. And so I kind of just avoided that. And I happened to find this registered investment advisory space. And I was like, whoa, okay, it looks like these people are doing their own research and maybe I could work for them and do this investment analysis. And so what I did is I started calling companies in the state of Wisconsin and the state of Illinois until someone would pick up. Someone finally did pick up, and I ended up getting my foot in the door at a large registered investment advisor in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, which is northern Wisconsin. And from there, I really just worked my way through and was really able to get a really good grasp of the company. I worked in marketing to operations to financial planning to the investment analysis side. I got into a little bit of the sales. And so they really allowed me to kind of do a lot because I was the person that was always raising his hand to say, hey, I'll do that. Sure, I'll do it. But it was, not knowingly that those yeses were going to go to something, but it allowed me to understand how a business works within this space. From there, I got recruited down to Madison, Wisconsin to be really head up the financial planning department with another registered investment advisor to really kind of help guide or path that to success. And, things there just weren't as great as I thought. And so that's where I met my two business partners, Dan Weiss and Nathaniel Leach. And they came over and said, hey, Tim, why don't we maybe try to do this ourselves? I said, okay, let's do it. So we ended up jumping ship and we started LBW Wealth Management about 6.5 years ago. And from there, we've really just been in this iteration growth phase of different things. Like I was mentioning on the pre-show, we were very asset management heavy when we first started. Today, we look nothing like we started. We are very planning centric and we're on a subscription-based fee. So we switched from an asset under management fee schedule or fee structure to a subscription-based fee structure with the addition of assets under management if our clients want us to do that for them, but they don't have to do that. So they don't have to bring assets to us if they don't want. They can do their own investments if they so choose, and they pay us a monthly subscription fee for our planning services. Within that, obviously, I'm the director of financial planning. So I head up our financial planning department. And we've really kind of created our own planning model. And I like to say it's really data centric. And so there's a lot of work that goes on. on how we actually go about our planning. And so it's been very interesting to scale and grow. And we've hit some roadblocks and some hiccups here and there, but overall it's been a really good journey. And I've truly now stumbled into something that I really do love. There's parts of the industry I don't, but for the majority, I love it so much. I hope we can change it and change the perception going forward. So that's my brief story.
Very, very well said. Succinct and right to the point there about what you guys are doing. I questioned you on some, how you guys have changed from asset management to subscription, which is we'll try to get into a little bit later here today. But let's look at what you've done. And one of the first things is I always like to ask this question, like, how did you get in this industry? Because quite honestly, there's no real true, here, you go to school and this is your path. This industry still is struggling with that, isn't it? It's still struggling with creating a path for those who come and want to be a planner. Or, what is this investment stuff? How can I work with, investments and maybe not as an analyst, but, with clients. Financial planning industry, I think, struggles a lot with giving that space. And I think people like you and others out there in the industry who are making these changes, who are growing their firms, are really giving back to the industry by allowing opportunities for others to come and join without having to go sell their soul for a while and then make it out like you or like myself and a lot of others did. Even Michael Kitces, I interviewed him, and he even started as an insurance salesperson at one point. Mm-hmm. So, it tends to be, where we're at now. I'm not saying if you're listening, that if you're an insurance company that you're wrong or bad, or you guys know me, I'm all about balance. I really don't care where you're at. I want to help your balance. But I think as far as transitioning this to an industry, we struggle with that. So thank you for sharing that story and what you guys are doing at LBW. Let's talk about balance. You're a business owner. You've got a lot going on. You've got employees. You're directing the financial planning process at the company. What is your definition of balance?
Oh, my definition of balance. There's a book that I had read, and I can't remember the title of it at this point, but in the book, they talk about kind of give an analogy or a story. And they talk about a child on a bike that's riding down a hill and going faster and faster and faster, but they don't have brakes, and then they crash. That's kind of the balance that I feel like I have sometimes. And it's funny. I've if you talk to my girlfriend or if you talk to my family, they all say that I probably work too much. I definitely come from a family of where work was applauded, was given as seen as success, hard work. I think even playing sports like football, it's right. You work hard, you get in the gym, you don't stop. Even if you're, not feeling good, you just keep moving, you keep going. I'm getting a little bit older, trying to be a little bit more mature. And I'm starting to realize that balance also isn't always easy, in the sense of always just working and working hard. It is a constant battle that I have conversations with, because if you look at people who have been quote unquote successful, let's say Elon Musk, Bill Gates, things in that nature, and you notice that you read about them and all they do is work. And so I think our society in general doesn't really promote a balanced and healthy work-life situation. And I'm trying to unravel, I think, some really deep-seated things for me. And it hasn't been the easiest, to be very honest. It really has been difficult to do over time. And I'm still in the process of trying to get it done. So I don't think I am actually the best example of balance, to be very honest. And I think my definition would be, balance to me is more so living your values. And if your values is work, or if it is something else and you're doing it and you're being fulfilled by those, I don't think it's a wrong answer, because I think everybody has a different definition. But I think it's really hard sometimes to look in the mirror and really start understanding your values and what does that mean, and then making the appropriate adjustments to make sure that gets done. Because family is important to me, friends are important to me. Obviously, my girlfriend is important to me. There are a lot of things that are, and sometimes work does take up too much of my space. And so it is something I'm consciously always trying to figure out how to balance, and I don't always do the greatest job. So that's how I guess I would define it. It's a little bit of a roundabout answer.
Oh, dude, I love it. In my book, Achieving Balance, that's exactly it. Like when you're living your highest priorities in life, you feel balanced. My listeners, you guys hear me say this all the time, but what are your highest priorities? What is the most important thing to you? And Tim, this is why I wrote it that way, is because I'm not out here telling people, here's the 7 baby steps to balance. Like I'm not trying to be the person telling you what to do with your life, but you know what your values are. And discovering those values, that's a very interesting topic because if you can discover what those are, then you can begin to consciously live them, consciously go after them. And by utilizing your time well and creating an ideal calendar in your life to do that is what we do at the Make Time Institute. I'm curious, like when you talk values, because we talked a little bit about religion, and I know a lot of people gain values from religion. And that's a whole separate topic, but where would you say that you derive your values from? Like if you were to say, Travis, these are my values, and this is where I discover them, where are those typically found, my friend?
Yeah. So, and it's funny. I'm probably somebody that wouldn't say that religion guides me. That's just kind of where I've always sat within that specific subject. I know a lot of people that is a great place to find values or to discover it. Just wasn't the right fit for me. Just hasn't been, or just haven't found it, I guess. So, when I was looking at values, I am definitely somebody that I am more futuristic, right? I don't live in the present the best. I don't live in the past, but I don't really live in the present. I probably live in the future a little too much. And so I never really ever asked myself, what are my values, to be very honest. That's why I bring it up, because I'm always looking at the next. And for me personally, and this is, I guess, a little bit more being open on here, is I started going to therapy. And actually therapy is where I started getting asked those questions and to slow down and to say, what are your values? Where do they come from? What do you value? How should you value them? And, my therapist, she always asks me these difficult questions, and it makes me think, and I had to slow down. So over the last few years, I've been having that conversation with myself of what are my values? And I think where I've found my values is just looking back kind of at my past and looking at things that I like about myself, things that I would say were beneficial to me, and looking at going through a list of different things and then and evaluating that. And so for me, connection is a really big one. So I obviously like to be on here. I really like to connect with people. I always have since I was a child. Relationships are something that are really important to me. So making sure I can prioritize them in a way, which again, sometimes work takes up on that, which is difficult. I think creativity and curiosity is a big value of mine. I think I was really shy about that when I was a child, because it's not always fun to be the one that wants to read or learn. And so I think I've embraced that more so, and work actually really fulfills that quite a bit. Being a business owner, to me, I always tell people I wanted to be an artist. I'm not. I'm a terrible drawer. I always wanted to. But what a business is a blank canvas. And that's how I can express my creativity. So that expression comes out through work for me quite a bit. And I love the outdoors as well. And so that's something that I try to do as much as I can. And so I try to involve a lot of that. So work does fulfill quite a bit of my values because I love working with our clients. It's something that I really do enjoy and get a lot from, as well as the creativity piece. But then it's also balancing with some of those connections and stuff outside of work and making sure I have time and space for that as well. Because I think when I'm depleted in that realm, it's something that is hard for me. So that's kind of where I've really found it, is really going through therapy and then being asked these difficult questions and then kind of falling back and looking at my past, which I never do. I mean, like, where is this coming from? And a lot of it does come from how I grew up. A lot comes from my mother. I'm definitely a mama's boy for sure. My father as well. And my siblings. I look up, I'm the youngest of 4. So it's just where my values were kind of created is really kind of my past. And I think even where I went to school and some of my friends have shaped a lot of who I am. So that's kind of how I came across it. But to be honest, until I was about 29, 30 years old, I didn't really think about it.
Yeah. Well, this is a conversation that, I've seen a lot of reviews on my book on Amazon. The one that I actually liked the best is one that says, this is the best book on priority management I've ever written. I was like, whoa, totally floored. But that's exactly right. Like, where are our priorities? where do they come from?
Mhm.
And you would not be the first to say that, Travis, my values come from my family, my upbringing, my schooling, my society, friends. Like, of course they do. Of course they do. And this is where we draw from these values, and looking back in therapy, can be very effective in looking back in a structured way. There's a structured way for therapy. I studied therapy. I didn't go that route. I'd rather coach and focus on the future, but there's absolute value when you come to, a great therapeutic interaction to help you look at values. Now, for those who are struggling, like, hey, how do I find values? What I like to do is have you do a quick exercise where you were to say, if I was to die tomorrow, don't focus on the type of death, but if I was to die and I take 10 areas of my life, I want you to write what you want people to say about you in those 10 areas. And typically in those 10 areas, you will find words like connection, creativity, artistic, loving, like the things that you mentioned, Tim. And that's those typical values we bring up. They're essentially characteristics that describe us. And then I let my clients know those characteristics, that's who actually you want to become. So not only your values great to describe you, but they're actually lifelong goals. And as you move towards achieving and becoming these lifelong goals and characteristics, it shapes your life. So your values truly can, if you're taking a conscious effort, can really change who you are or make you become that person that you really need to be, that you want to be. So I love this, Tim. This is a great conversation. I love getting to talk about values, and I, this always goes a different direction. I never know where these podcast interviews will go, but and we talk values for a long time, and I appreciate that. One thing you also brought up is the issue with so many great thinkers, businessmen. Like you're an entrepreneur, you're a businessman, but we have really bad examples of incredibly successful people. Elon Musk, the richest person in the world right now, has actually said, and I've called him out on social media, and he'll probably won't ever, give me a time of day, and that's fine. I love what he's doing. I love what he's about. Like I support a lot of things that he's about, but he suggests that you cannot change the world unless you're working 90-hour weeks. And I say baloney. Of course you can change the world. Yes, he started several big companies, and yes, he's considered by many to be a genius. Okay. But we can have balance. Like you can have it all. You can have balance, and you can be incredibly successful. What I have seen by Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Elon Musk is, the areas that they struggle in the most, relationships. They struggle the most in relationships. So if my number one definition of success is family relationship, then I can be a success and I can change the world through that value that I hold dear. And I think that's, Tim, I think that's the paradigm shift that needs to happen. I think that's the shift that needs to go on in the world is like, hey, yes, be applauded for working, be applauded for that value of hard work. But we're not, we're not that society anymore where we need this connection. And most advisors tell me spiritual health, physical health, and relationships are their top threes. There occasionally work or finances or hobbies might show up a little bit higher, but overall, I've done this hundreds of times. Those are the top three. So I think that's the paradigm shift. And you brought this up, we struggle with the success, the definition of success. So I appreciate you for bringing that up and for telling us where you struggle. What do you think contributes to your struggle with being out of balance? What do you think is maybe one of the biggest causes for getting pulled out of that balance, not living your priorities as much as you'd like?
Yeah. I've been thinking about that question actually quite a bit over the last little bit. And I think it's hard that I love what I do. So it's difficult from the standpoint of what I do. I really do love it. I love owning the business. I love what we're doing from a planning perspective. And I have the personality type where I'm a little bit of more of a sprinter. I'm not a marathoner. And so I have to understand who I am in order to kind of create some of that balance. And I think I'm starting to finally understand who I am. And I'm a stop, go type of a person. I like to go 110% when I'm on, but then I also like to go 100% to zero when I'm off. And that's just kind of my personality, but it's been hard for me to understand that, where other people may be marathoners and where they can just continue to chug along. But I really do need that separation. I need the break. And so sometimes where I struggle is that I don't give myself the break. I don't give myself the time to really kind of regenerate. And that's where I usually typically will lose creativity. I'll lose motivation. I'll lose stamina, to be very honest, when it comes to just work or life. And then that does bleed into my personal life. I'm more irritable. I'm a little bit more angry. Things come up because it's not because of my personal life, but it's maybe coming from stress from work. And so being aware of that and understanding how I function and not trying to fight it and be something I'm not has been a really big a stride for me. But it is definitely where I've started to realize where I do struggle personally, because there are some times where you have to work a really hard week because something random comes up that you didn't expect. But then I have to recognize that I need the recovery too. And that may not be the same for Dan or Nathaniel or any of our other employees. And so trying to give each member within our company the space to be able to do what they need to do to be at their highest performing efforts is something that is also is important. So that's probably where I struggle the most. Is I love what I do, and I get a little obsessive and I go kind of really hard for a short period of time. And sometimes that short period of time turns too long. And then when it goes too long, that's where the balance really starts to come off the hinges and becomes a little bit of a struggle. So that's really kind of where I've tried to boil it down to for myself. And it's a battle too, I love what I do. And so to accept that work does fulfill me, it is something that I do enjoy. And I have to recognize that, where sometimes I feel ashamed or disappointed because people will say, hey, you work too much, but it is something that I really do like, and it provides quite a bit. So it's understanding that as well from an outside perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And this industry, 5 times the rate of workaholics versus any other industry in America, the average American. And I think one of the reasons why is we are a very helping profession. We are therapists in a way that we help people through a process to kind of be okay with where they're at with money and then move forward. And then we're kind of in a coach role, and then we're in a planning role. Like, we shift these roles, but oftentimes people come to us because something's wrong. They need help. They want us to change something. And because of that role, if we really enjoy people, then we enjoy this industry, right? Otherwise we'd be an accountant. No offense to my CPAs listening. But you really like these relationships. We become part of like a family member at some points. And so you bring up a really important point, and that is this connection. And connection is obviously very high in your values too, right? Mm-hmm. Connection and creativity, and the work allows you to create connection, creativity with the business. So it really fulfills you quite a bit. The thing that I found to be the most helpful is creating boundaries. There's boundaries for anything. There's boundaries for work. There's boundaries for relationships, boundaries for our health. Like, we've got to create these boundaries, or else what happens is we are compensated so well for what we do in this industry that it becomes what Rick Kaler, I had it on my show the other day. He calls it an insidious cycle, because the instant hit of dopamine and that rush of, I did a good job, I did so great. Like, it's an instant hit that we become somewhat addicted to this relationship, this work relationship. I found that a lot of workaholics tend to work more when they're stressed because they feel fulfilled there. They feel like, I can get a sense of belonging, but also value from what I do. So this is a very tight rope to walk. Yes. Where we're asked to do such great work for our clients. We're asked to be fiduciaries. We're asked to do some great things and create these great relationships with them so that they will trust us and we can help them. Yet it's a fine line between where that becomes workaholism and what I call the workaholic trap. You see a lot of other advisors. You have other advisors in your company. You see this industry as a whole. What do you think are some major issues that are are maybe getting advisors stuck in this workaholic trap? What do you think causes them to go down this road?
I think I really like the way that you framed the idea of helping. Growing up, my father was a firefighter. My mother was a nurse. I come from a helping career. I would never want to be a firefighter, nor would I ever want to be a nurse. That's what landed me, I guess, as a financial planner. And it's funny that it is an edge of mine. And I think if you look at Dan, who's also our front facing individual, he has a very similar bent. He came from a teaching family. So there is a lot of that ideology of helping, and it is very powerful and fulfilling, but I think you're also right with the boundaries. I would agree with that. But to answer your question with the industry, with the workaholism, which is an interesting topic. I don't know that I have an answer because I haven't answered it myself. So I think I'm working on it to know how to go about it. I think boundaries is a great idea. And I think sometimes that some of the things are easier said than done because you do feel a responsibility. And I think that's probably not talked about enough, is the difficulty it actually is to make those adjustments and changes. I'm not trying to justify it. It may sound like I'm trying to justify it. I'm not. It's just, I know there's a lot out there that people are like, well, just do this. And it's like, okay. I mean, it sounds easy, but if you really start looking at it from the standpoint of, well, I have so many clients, so many different things. And so you really start, at least within our business, I can speak to this, is a scalability. The scalability of a comprehensive financial planning firm is extremely difficult. And a lot of people don't discuss that. So if you really want to do comprehensive, in-depth planning and you want to scale it past a solo firm, maybe not just have 50 clients, 20 clients that you manage, but have it as a full-fledged enterprise level firm, it's really hard to do. And it's hard to do because we don't have the right tool sets to do it, because our industry was never built to actually do it. It was just really built to talk about it, to maybe gather more assets. So I think that our industry has evolved quite a bit from the standpoint of, if you go back to the early 90s when first RAs really started coming up, this independent wave really kind of grew out of the root, the roots finally sprouted. And obviously it's been a slow not slow, but pretty significant growth going forward. And everyone's moving towards the independent route. Broker dealers are becoming a little bit less, even though they still dominate most of the market. But that's where a lot of talent's going, is for the independent side. But a lot of it was still asset management heavy. So we still are really kind of starting, I think, the sprouting of this true ideology of financial planning and actually doing it, and not just saying that we're doing it, but actually performing it. And I think that you find that it can be actually really difficult to get your hands on access to the data, get access to the appropriate information on a consistent basis. I mean, with having a subscription-based fee, there's a lot more requirements. Well, what am I getting? What are you providing for me? How much am I going to get? So now you have to develop a whole different type of firm structure. And so I think that that's also part of it, is that advisors may be working a lot if they're doing it appropriately, because it's a really laborious job that a lot of people sometimes don't also discuss. Like, if I have to gather statements from you every quarter or every month, it's a lot of work. Who's doing that? And then am I getting paid enough to be able to get somebody else to maybe help support some of that? So the scalability of a true planning centric firm is difficult. And I guess that's where I would come from with that question, is that we need better tool sets. We need better technology. And I think it's about time that we have it to be able to actually scale the true planning centric type of firm, and not just an asset management type of firm, or having an asset management type of firm that kind of cloaks themselves as saying we're doing financial planning. And so I think that could definitely benefit. But again, even if I probably had the tool sets, I probably still have to work on the balance, to be very honest.
Right. I was just going to say, like,
I preach to the choir.
Dude, this industry, we're fintech like lovers, aren't we? Like, we love anything tech. Like, I'm being very general. Maybe you're not a tech person out there, tech guy, tech gal, but reality is most of us like the latest, shiniest thing that's going to help us, to run the business and do other things. So I get it like that. It tends to be where we go, instead of like the interpersonal, like what you're doing with therapy, that's working on the interpersonal. I think that's what gets left out the most, Tim. I think that's what gets part of us, like, say, oh yeah, I need to be good for my clients, but we're not working on ourselves. We're working on the business, and we're maybe growing the business, but we forget about our health, right? So this is exactly why we wrote this book, and Derek Notman, who's fantastic. He's teaching independent guys to go out there and start their businesses and how to run it. And he's got some tech that's helping. He calls me the touchy feely guy. He's like, oh, here we got Travis. Now we're going to talk the touchy feely stuff for a second, but it's so important. Like it absolutely is. The psychological aspects of this are huge. And we've kind of opened that up today. It's been a great conversation. I'm with you. The change needs to happen to this industry. I think it needs to happen from within and on the macro level. We have some tech that's coming out that's hoping to help with the productivity, tracking, and scalability. There's great partners I work with on the scaling side, people I've interviewed for this podcast. You should definitely check those out if you're interested in more scalability, guys and gals that are listening to the podcast. Please do. But really, I think what it comes down to here, Tim, is how we're doing it. What direction are we coming from? As a comprehensive guy myself, when I left the big BD Northwestern, I started my own firm. I did exactly what I was doing subscription model, and I was piecing all the other pieces out and outsourcing and starting to hire. And you know what? There's very little practice management help. That's why I love XY Planning so much. I'm always touting them. I'm always speaking for them. I love Kitsis and what Alan Moore are doing over there. If I told them, man, where were you guys 10 years ago when I was trying to do this on my own? And, now I'm part of that. I really do feel like I'm part of helping the industry move. So it's a pleasure to talk to you. If you could give other advisors a heads up, like, man, these are one or two things I wish I would have maybe not done to help have better balance as I'm starting my RIA, what would you say?
Things I would have not done. So you're asking me to go back in the past. I told you. Yeah. Things I would have not done.
Or things that, man, learning from what I know now, going forward, here's what I would do better. Here's where I would start off. Like, hey, all right, man, I'm going to take this step in this darkness a little bit differently than what I did.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say. And again, hopefully this isn't a cop-out answer. It's hard for me to say what I would have done differently because I don't know that I would have done anything differently or I wouldn't have been where I am today. And I think that our firm is on a path that is just looks very different than most firms. And I'm actually very proud of it. It was a lot of work. And again, how we kind of go about our planning service. And we do go about it a little bit differently than most in the industry. I was on a different podcast where I was explaining it. They're like, well, you really go in depth. Like, yeah, we do. I don't want to do this job and not do it right. That's not my style. But the reason we got to this point was because it was just iterations, right? And I guess my biggest thing that I would promote, I guess, to the industry at large would be my one thing is we're not competing with one another. And I want to emphasize that where I think the RA space it's a small TAM, is a small tangible addressable market. It's not huge. And we're not competing with one another, even though I think sometimes advisors feel like we are. But we're not. If anything, we're competing against other outside forces that are trying to encroach on our business. And I think it's just really important to come together, because one thing that I think our industry struggles with and continues to struggle with, and wish I did have, which XYPN Network is definitely fulfilling some of this, is to be able to learn from each other. Because there's not great, like, yes, there's a CFP. I've done the CPWA. I've taken those classes, but sometimes you only learn from getting to know clients or having that client interaction, asking you a question like, oh, I never thought about that. Let me look into it. But we can accumulate that knowledge quicker if we all kind of work together, which is, again, why I do like the XYPN network. That's a great organization, or FPA or other networks that allow advisors to kind of come together. But if you can get a part of that and learn from other advisors of what they've done and haven't done and be able to kind of learn from their mistakes, that's fantastic. I mean, our biggest probably mistake is we should have probably switched our planning, gone to more subscription-based quicker, faster. But I don't know that we'd have been able to do it because we're just kind of finding our footing too. It just took us a minute to find our legs.
I love that connection is super important to you. Learning from each other, connecting with other networks. Like the force is strong with you on this one. It is like, I get you. And I wonder, I've interviewed a lot of financial advisors who have created masterminds because of this. Like they want to connect, they want to learn from each other. They want to just, hone in. I wouldn't be surprised if you get back to me someday, like, Travis, I started this mastermind. Look where I'm at. I'm like, of course you did, Tim. Like, you're a connector. This is what you do.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited for you. Thank you for being on the show. Thanks for being real with us. Thanks for telling us what really, you struggle with when it comes to balance, and how you've helping to move for the scalability for other RIAs in the industry. You're doing a great job. And it was a pleasure to interview you today, man.
Thank you, Travis. I really appreciate the time.